Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Reserved Investments. You guys are keeping me busy because there's a lot of moving parts in the antiques and collectibles trade right now. We are going to be doing a standalone video talking about the increasing prices of vintage Pokemon cards. In the last few months, there has been some massive surges in the vintage Pokemon card marketplace that I do want to address because ever since I started this channel, I told you guys that vintage is where it's at. There's too much modern product out there that is being hoarded, that is being speculated upon. And if you look at the population reports of graded cards, you're going to see vintage Pokemon cards is where you want to be long term, not modern Pokemon. And the other development that we are going to do a video on, I'm sure that some of you have already heard about this, and I shouldn't be laughing, but it's just a bizarre story. It's one of those things that happens from time to time in the antiques and collectibles trade. There was a sports memorabilia dealer that was caught fraudulently counterfeiting certain items and the signatures of those items. And it's very interesting how it unfolded. It would appear that the police issued a search warrant for the person's house, and unfortunately, he decided to take his own life. So these events are still unfolding at present time. There is a massive amount of financial loss, of course, as you can imagine, due to this counterfeiting operation. So we are going to be doing a standalone video talking about those events and just the overall risk of investing in signed historical documents, signed sports memorabilia, even signed trading cards of any type. Remember, guys, if you're going after valid signatures, especially of celebrities or sports athletes or other famous historical figures, you have to be very careful. You have to understand what you are buying, and you got to know the risks. So that's why we are going to be doing a video that is going to touch on that, because I consider that story very fascinating. And unfortunately, in this day and age where money talks and BS walks, that's pretty much the antiques and collectibles trade in the year 2025, this is going to be the norm going forward. There's going to be a lot of unfortunate opportunities where good-hearted collectors, investors, speculators, and dealers are going to be taken advantage of by, unfortunately, people that just see dollar signs. So that will be an interesting video when we get to that point. Now, I want to bring your attention back to part 15 of the 18,000 subscriber Q&A series. And there's an excellent question here that we're going to answer first that talks about archival framing and also the autograph collecting market. So that's why I chose this question for question 1 of part 15 of the 18,000 subscriber Q&A series. And before I get to it, I do want to state this. I have never really done a video that talks about the ins and outs, the do's and don'ts of archival framing, or also even straight up autograph collecting, which really I don't like that market. But if you guys want me to do a standalone video on either the do's and don'ts, the ins and outs of archival framing, or even my thoughts on collecting autographs and why I don't recommend it from an investment standpoint, let me know in the comment section below, and I will put those videos into production. So now that I've been speaking for 3.5 minutes, here is question 1. Sean, what are your thoughts on the framing business? So before I go any further, let's talk about this a little bit. Archival framing, when done right, it's either a godsend or it's an effing nightmare when done wrong. Now, obviously, if you guys know who I am, I've been in the antiques and collectibles trade since the ripe old age of 12. I've handled a lot of items in my day, some extremely valuable, that have been both expertly, properly, archivally framed, and I'm sorry to say, on the other end of the spectrum, things that should have never been framed to begin with, because the archival framist didn't know what the hell they were doing. So this is what you need to know if you're going to get something archivally framed. There's 2 parts to this equation. One is the materials used, and the second part is the technique used. Now let's first start with the materials used. Obviously, if you want to get a manuscript, a historical document, a piece of vintage advertising, a vintage movie poster, if you want to get anything like that, archivally framed, you obviously want to protect it over the long term, and you also most likely want to display it. That's the whole point of framing. So for something to qualify as being archivally framed, it should not damage or negatively impact that piece, the item that you are trying to display, over the long term. So no damage should come from the materials being used. Now, how do archival framists, the good ones, go about doing this? Well, they typically use what are known as acid-free materials to frame these particular items. Now, there are companies out there that sell acid-free framing materials. I believe, if I recall correctly, it's been a while, University Products, I think, is one. I do think there are others out there. If I looked into my notes, if I looked into my documents, I could find their names. I just don't know them off the top of my head. I will also tell you the second thing that you have to look at is the technique being used. Believe it or not, in my day, I have come across some artifacts, whether it was a historical document, whether it was a rare vintage movie poster worth a lot of money, where somebody sent it off to get framed. And the framer, unfortunately, permanently attached the item in question to the frame. That is a very big no-no. So if you're going to get something archivally framed, the two questions you must ask. Number one, what materials are you using? Are they acid-free? Are they archival safe materials where this piece, if I display it, will not show any further signs of wear and age? It will not affect the piece negatively in any way going forward. And number two, what technique are you using? If I need to bust this thing out of the frame, is it going to hurt the piece in any way? That's what you need to ask. And this is vital because I've had clients that have come to me through my consulting service. And they said, Sean, my grandfather died. He was a pretty interesting dude. He had this massive collection of historical documents or vintage posters or whatever it was. And he got these pieces framed. And I want to now, I'm picking out the ones that I want to hold on to for sentimental reasons or because I think they're cool, but I want to consign the rest to auction. I have already been in the middle of a situation where we have sent the collection to an auction house. The auction house looked at it and said, you know, to make sure that we get top dollar for these pieces, we want to crack them open and we want to verify that they are 100% original, legit, authentic, and we also want to assess the condition. We want to know what wear and tear is under the frame possibly that we're not seeing. And they go to break them out of the frame, and guess what? The items are permanently attached to the frame. So you really have to ask questions if you are going to get something archivally framed. It is important. Now, rest of your question. Sean, I was thinking about framing low to mid-level autographed items. Okay, I'm going to stop you right there. Due to the cost of archival framing, it usually is not going to be worth framing low to mid-level autographed items. Okay, that's the whole point. If you really go to an expert framer, you're going to see just to frame something very small, it's probably going to cost you several $100s to get that properly framed if they are truly using archival framing materials and techniques. You go on to state, I have 16 Warren Buffett autographs that I would like to start with. Okay, I'm going to end your question there, and this is all I'm going to say. I personally do not like autograph collecting for the sake of financial investment. It very rarely ever works out because somebody like Warren Buffett is still alive and he's still signing things on a regular basis. Now, if you have a historical document, something very significant from a historical figure that has an autograph on it, that would be a much better investment than just going after somebody's autograph because they're famous. And like I said, if you want to see me do a full video on this, giving you the ins and outs, the reasons why I do not like investing in solely celebrity or historical figure artifacts and signatures without some type of historical importance attached to it, I'll gladly do a full video on that. But for the most part, if you are going in this direction, seeking financial gain, you are making a very bad mistake, in my opinion. I hope that helps. Next question. And we're going from archival framing and autographs to comic book collecting. So here we go. In Reserved Investments, we cover it all. Sean, congratulations on hitting the 18,000 milestone. My question, what is both your short-term and long-term outlook for key graded Golden Age comic books? When I see key Golden Age comic books, I mean the Batman 1 through 10s, the classic Joker covers, the Superman 1s, the timely comics, as well as other Golden Age books that tend to stay within a low CGC population census. I have seen many of these books continue to come to market over the past 24 months, sometimes multiple times a year. Okay, let me stop you right there. Obviously, that should tell you something. Doesn't mean I don't think there's opportunity still in this market, but most of these books that everybody thinks is truly rare are really not rare. You hit the nail on the head when you called them scarce. And a lot of these books, in all honesty, really aren't that scarce. It's just obviously, if you're going to look at the CGC population reports and you're going to compare how many copies of a book like Batman 1 or Superman 1 are in existence and compare it to, say, Amazing Spider-Man 300, obviously, your Batman 1, your Superman 1 are going to appear to be very, very rare. But in the antiques and collectibles trade, especially on the collectible side of the market, we tend to use the word rare way too much, when in all actuality, most of these items, if they've ever been mass produced in any manner, any caliber, they are not truly rare. Some are scarce, but rare is kind of a misleading term, and I've done videos on this in the past. Now back to your question, because here's the crux of it. I am in my late 30s who invests in this market, and I was speaking with an older collector who was in his late 60s, who was also well vested in this market, and his opinion is that he believes these items have reached and overreached their price ceilings. What are your thoughts? Okay, in all honesty, if we are getting into my DeLorean time machine, and we are going back to the year 2000, 2001, when CGC first opened its doors and started grading comic books for the very first time, there was tremendous opportunity in this market because you had several catalysts that appeared on the scene at that time. And remember, all is what a catalyst is. It's something that changes the trajectory of a collecting market for better or worse. And all the stars pretty much aligned perfectly with the vintage comic book marketplace back in the late 1990s, early 2000s. Case in point, CGC came along. You had a lot of investors, speculators, collectors come into the market and said, hey, this is going to be the next big thing. This is just like rare coins. They're grading these books. They're going to go to the stratosphere. Then roughly 8 to 9 years later, you had the advent of the Marvel Cinematic Universe with Iron Man 1. Now interest was front and center on comic books, on superheroes. Demand was at an all-time high, and prices slowly started to escalate as the economy recovered from the great financial crisis. There were people taking advantage. They were okay with the overall economy. We were healing from what happened in the 2008, 2009 financial crisis. People now had money, and they started moving towards alternate asset classes. Comic books was one of those markets that benefited highly. Then along with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, you had DC follow suit. You had this spread to streaming shows, whether it be Disney Plus, Netflix, and the like. The whole thing blew up. Then we had the pandemic where everybody was stuck indoors. The government was giving some of us free money, whether it was deserved or not. And this, of course, caused a massive speculator boom in this market. And prices hit the stratosphere. They peaked. Then they started to dissipate. Certain markets pretty much popped more than others. If we look at the market for Rolex watches, if we look at the market for great video games, those markets pretty much crashed at this particular point in time. Comic books were hit pretty hard as well. So where I'm going with this, if you think that gains in the comic book marketplace over the next 10 to 20 years are going to be like they were in the previous 10 to 20 years, you're 100% wrong. As a matter of fact, you're 100% crazy. You don't know what you're doing. Please do not invest in this market. Please do not pass go. Please do not collect $200. However, if you have a realistic perspective that most likely the vintage comic book marketplace isn't going to perform over the next 10 to 20 years like it did in the last 10 to 20 years, and you look at some of these books and you go, you know, this book was at a high price, I'm just going to pull this out of the air, of $7,000 in CGC 9.2 condition. Now it's at $4,000. Is there opportunity there? Well, Maybe there is. It's still a risk, but I do see opportunity in this market. My caution against the comic book marketplace was, again, if we get in my DeLorean time machine and we go back 5 years ago when I first started this channel, I used to have people that would come into the comment section and they would argue with me and they would tell me that eventually comic books are going to have a higher market cap than that of rare coins. And I would roll my eyes and I would laugh at these people. Now, today, I don't think anybody is arguing that comic books in any particular definition of a parallel universe or the future going forward are ever going to top the value of rare coins. We're just not seeing it because the market pulled back substantially, and now it's in a lull. And I've said this before, you also have changing demographics to worry about. So where I'm going with this, on one side of the equation, I don't think the comic book marketplace is dying. It's evolving. And number two, there's still opportunity there if you buy right and you have realistic expectations. My problem is the Timmies, Kimmies, and Poindexters that come into these markets and they only see dollar signs, they don't have realistic expectations. They buy something for $2,000 and they sit there and they go, well, gee, this was once a 10-cent comic book. Now it's $2,000. If we look at the gains that happen in the market, that means 20 years from now, it's going to be an $80,000 comic book. It makes no sense. It doesn't work that way. This is not Wall Street. We're not analyzing individual stocks where you have cash flows, you have inventory turnover, you have sales forecasts, you have cash on hand, assets to debt ratios, all that fun stuff. These are collectibles. So we really can't analyze them the same way as financial assets. This is the same problem I have with Bitcoin, for those of you wondering. Bitcoin cannot also be analyzed like a Fortune 500 company, to use that as an example. Okay? So as long as you have realistic expectations, there's still opportunity in this market. If, however, you think that the comic book you're buying right now in the next couple of years is going to surpass the price that it achieved during the pandemic boom, you're cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, and I can't help you. So that's how I'm going to answer that question now that we're 17 minutes in. Let's switch now to video games. So we went from archival framing to autographs to comic books. Now we're coming back to video games. Here we go. Sean, can you tell me if it's worth speculating in the European video game market? I live in the Netherlands, and hardly anyone here collects video games. Is Europe lagging behind? Okay, let me stop you right there because that's all I need to know to answer this question. First of all, if you have a passion towards vintage video games, yeah, I think that you should collect them if it's something you enjoy. The problem is if you're doing it solely for financial reasons and you've already stated you live in the Netherlands, I would tell you to stay away from the video game marketplace. Again, that assumes that you have no passion for these items. It's just something that you would think about speculating in for the hell of it. I would tell you to avoid the market. Now, to be fair here, and I want to be very fair because this is a worldwide YouTube channel. There are people right now watching this channel in China, Japan, Europe, Great Britain, Canada, Australia, of course, the United States where I'm located. So I will state this. There are prominent collectors over in Europe. I can't promise you that they're in the Netherlands, but there are a lot of video game collectors, speculators, and investors overseas, just like they are in the US. That said, investing primarily in vintage video games or graded video games has been driven by US audiences primarily. Now, that's not to say when we look at PAL format games, games that were released typically in the European video game market over the years, there are certain games that were released exclusive to that market. Those games have a lot of collectible value even to other regions, like US collectors would want to get those games, just like US collectors go nuts for certain Japanese import games. But primarily, it's the US side of the market that is driving the mass speculation and the price activity in this entire market by and large, if that makes sense. In other words, when we look at certain collecting markets, they're cultural in nature. Video games, believe it or not, even though they originated, most of your popular games anyway, with Nintendo, Sega at the helm, SNK, Neo Geo, oh, you're going to really take me down memory lane here, PC Engine, TurboGrafx, all that stuff, that all really came out of Japan for the most part. But it's interesting how it's more US audiences that, especially when we look at condition-sensitive games, factory-sealed games, they're the ones that are going after that market. And I'm part of that market, to be fair. I love this stuff. So what I would tell you is, if you don't have an interest in European video games, don't collect, don't speculate in this market. If you do have an interest, it may be something that you want to seek out. But overall, you're probably not going to get rich speculating and collecting in PAL market games. You're also going to have to branch out into the Japanese import scene and also US releases if you're trying to make a go at this. That's the best way I would answer this. So with this being part 15, I want to take one more question here and then end it, because some of you have told me you don't like to sit through 50-minute videos. So I'm trying to end this within like 25 minutes, just so that then we can get to part 16. So here is the final question. Yu-Gi-Oh! Versus Pokemon art style, which do you prefer more? You guys should know me by now. I like Pokemon. Pokemon is in my heart. It's in my blood. It's in my soul. I do like Pokemon. Don't get me wrong, nothing against Yu-Gi-Oh! But if I'm going to invest in a collectible card game, it's going to be Pokemon #1, Magic the Gathering #2. I'm really not a fan of Yu-Gi-Oh!, so I don't invest in Yu-Gi-Oh! I'm sorry to say. I also really never was fond of the art style in particular. So this concludes part 15 of the 18,000 subscriber Q&A series. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, and I will do my best to put forth more videos for you guys soon. Thank you for watching.